The study of the manuscripts of the Quran, I would say, is at an early stage. It's in its infancy. There is a boom of studies on it, but there is so much material out there. We don't even know how many manuscripts are there lying around. We know that there are libraries with hundreds, perhaps thousands of manuscripts, many of them of the Quran, which have not been even catalogued. One of these discoveries was made in the 1970s in the great mosque of Sana'a in the Yemen, where a group of builders were fixing a ceiling and the ceiling collapsed. And they found a variety of materials, written materials, which they took to the authorities. Now, part of this collection was one of these pieces that we call palimpsests. That is a piece of parchment, a piece of animal skin, which has been prepared for writing, has been written on with one text, and then later on, for whatever reason, has been erased and written on top. So we've got two layers. Now, we call one of these palimpsests the Sana Palimpsest, and it's the object of our latest book in the Quranic study series.
The Sana Palimpsest is a manuscript made of parchment. This parchment has been palimpsested, that means has been washed very probably rather than scratched, and another text has been written upon the erased script. So in the case of the Sana Palimpsest, both layers of text are Quran.
The difference in time between the lower layer and the upper layer, both of them being Quranic, is very short. Perhaps 50 years, perhaps 100 years, but not more than that.
The book consists on the addition of both layers of text, the lower text and the upper text. Both are passages of the Quran, and they are dated by the expert to the 7th century for the lower text and 8th century for the upper text. The main objective of this work is to understand for which use each layer of text has been written. Why people in the 7th century wrote Quran fragments and then they erased them and they wrote upon the erasure another Quran. So the question is why and when and how they did it.
These more recent discoveries in the study of Quranic manuscripts, especially the very, very early ones, they contain a number of textual layers and indicators to the context out of which they arose, which would actually help us reconstruct historically the process of Quranic composition and redaction over time in a particular historical setting. In this way, they would supplement material that we know from later literary sources. And one very interesting thing, given the atmosphere of historiographic skepticism, is that some of this manuscript material, these material sources actually then confirm quite a lot of what occurs in later literary sources as well. And this goes really against a prevalent mood of skepticism towards Arabic sources in general.
What we can say is that nowadays there are different techniques that are helping us study these objects, one of them being ultraviolet lighting and photography. Photoshop as well has developed a lot. The other technique that has also been used to date these manuscripts, these objects, is radiocarbon 14. Now, for this you need to cut a little corner of the object, which in itself is slightly problematic if you want, and put it under the test. Now, radiocarbon 14 does not give you an exact year, it gives you a range of dates, but nevertheless, the tests that have been carried out on the Sana Palimpsest throw a very, very early date. So we're talking about the first generations of Muslims who have produced these texts.
The French-Italian mission for the imaging of the Sana Palimpsest was in 2007, October 2007, and it took just 1 week for imaging the palimpsest. What is interesting is to underline the fact that for arriving to that week and be able to do the imaging, we needed 5 years of contacts, establishing contacts with the Yemeni authorities, scholars, in order to have permission, because it's not just a matter of imaging, but it's a matter of having permission for making the images. The other important aspect in the French-Italian project is the fact that for the first time they used a special imaging, so they applied ultraviolet lights in order to enhance the lower text and try to make it more visible, more legible.
The method consists mainly on reconstructing the lower text as far as it's possible, because this erased script will remain palimpsested. We cannot reconstruct the whole text. And after the reconstruction, the second objective is to edit the text with filling the missing parts. My book consists on an edition of the lower text and of the upper text, and analysis of the particular features of the manuscript that show the reasons behind writing these passages of the Quran.
This discovery, together with other discoveries such as other manuscripts in Birmingham, a discovery some decades ago in Cambridge, and other places, have called the attention of the scholars. There are a number of scholars who are actually studying the material aspect of the objects, what we call codicology. And there are others who are devoting their efforts to the study of the text itself. So Asma Hilali, what she's done is she has done an edition of the text. The book itself does not reproduce the images of the palimpsest, but it provides the transcription of the text, which is an incredibly difficult exercise.
I published this work in order to show that the Quran text is not an immaculate object. It has a history, it has been used by people. The Quran has not been always a book, but also fragments, written, collected, erased, annotated, explained by students, teachers, for private rather than for public use.
The Sana Palimpsest has many interesting features, like, for example, a different order of the surahs. So, for example, Surah 9 is followed by Surah 19, and this is quite a remarkable element in the Sana Palimpsest with all the other elements.
The book on the Sana Palimpsest really highlights the fluidity between the oral and the written, which really influences the way I understand the transmission of hadith, but also the transmission of the Quran itself, and the way in which religious texts were received in the very earliest period of Islam.
The study of these manuscripts may shed light on how people formed reading circles, how people were taught, how people memorized. Of course, there's an element of making hypotheses and also speculation, perhaps at times, but these are evidence. The Muslim tradition says that it was the Quran was revealed to the Prophet Muhammad, and then it was written down by various companions in various forms. Some accounts say that some companions may have compiled whole copies of the Quran, and it was Caliph Uthman who then created an officially sanctioned copy, if you want. And so what the study of the manuscripts does is that it provides material evidence in support or against some of these theories.